Yes. Discuss next.
Good evening, everyone. It's 6:31 p.m. The September 20th, 2018 meeting of the Mountain View Western School District Board of Trustees is called to order. Will you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance if you can stand? It's okay, it's good if you are not ready to.
We won't read anything into it. Just stay seated.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thanks, everyone. May I have roll call, please?
Jose Gutierrez Jr.
Dr. Mueller, Deborah Wilson,
Paul
and Karen Blakely. And may I have a motion to approve the agenda? So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, on a motion made by trustee Wheeler and seconded by trustee Gutierrez, the agenda was unanimously approved. Now is the time, the opportunity for members of the public to address the board concerning items on the closed session agenda. Does anyone wish to speak on a closed session agenda item? Okay, hearing none, at 6:32 p.m. we are moving to closed session. Thank you.
I didn't know why.
Okay, it's 7 p.m. We're calling the meeting back to order after closed session. And I'd like to report that no action was taken in closed session. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Do you have a motion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
On a motion made by trustee Gutierrez and seconded by trustee Wheeler, the consent agenda was approved unanimously. The next item on the agenda is communications. Do we have any members of employee organizations here this evening that would like to give a report?
Yes.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Sean Becker, and I'm the president of National.
Sean, will you make sure your microphone is on?
Such violence. Sean.
There.
All right. Good evening. My name is Sean Becker. I'm the president of Mountain View Educators Association and a teacher at Montalona Elementary. I'm here today to voice my opinion on Bullis Charter School. First and foremost, I feel it is not in the best interest of our district to allow Bullis Charter School's admittance into Mountain View. The existence of their charter school in the district would hurt all of our schools financially. Also, the school would pull from our student body, causing a lower class size around the district. And with that comes less teachers. I feel we have great educators here in our city, and I would like to retain their jobs. In addition, Bullis Charter School has litigated against Los Altos School District in the past, and this makes me very cautious. Cautious about how we should proceed. I ask the parents of Mountain View and the school board to not support Bullis Charter School in Mountain View. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Decker, I have a follow-up question for you.
Yes.
You said this proposal would lower class sizes in the district?
Yes, it would.
Class sizes are about at the maximum, are they not?
Correct.
Would lowering class sizes be a bad thing then?
My worry is with the lowering of class sizes would be the lowering of teachers, because it would be put on all aspects of the schools, and it could, in that turn, have to reduce the classes, and that would reduce teachers, especially with the amount of students that I could see going to them, and the financial burden that would come with it.
So you're not opposed to lower class size?
I am very opposed to lower class size. I am opposed to lowering teachers.
And this is the worst case scenario that we pull enough students where then teachers' positions are affected. I get your point.
That's what I'm worried about. I'm really worried about that the teacher positions would be affected. I'm not upset that it would possibly lower class size. I'm worried about the aspect of the jobs being lost. Sorry.
Is that
That
clear?
was misinterpreted.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Now I understand, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members here from district? I can't speak as many districts, committees that would like to speak? No? Dr. Rudolph?
No one is.
Okay, thank you. So we move on to item 7 on the agenda, community comments. This is the time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board and administration welcome this opportunity to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agenda items. Speakers are requested to complete a speaker card and state their name for the record. And if there are additional comments after 10 minutes have elapsed, this item may be continued after all the action and discussion items are completed. And I have one card already submitted by Jennifer Anderson Ross.
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to come here and introduce myself to anybody that I haven't met before in person. My name is Jennifer Anderson Rossi, and I'm an administrator at Bullis Charter School. My background includes teaching in traditional public, international, and public charter schools. I have been an educator for 18 years and have had many opportunities, including becoming a National Board Certified Teacher, collaborating in the design and implementation of the STEAM Practicum, a professional development for teachers and administrators from all over Santa Clara County for the past 3 years, as well as leading aspects of the Bullis professional development, overseeing the English Language Learner Program, mentoring new teachers within the Silicon Valley New Teacher Project, and have been the site administrator for the past 3 years at our North Campus located off of San Antonio. It's TK through 8th grade campus. I wanted to come tonight to formally speak to you as a board and share with you the work that we have been doing. First of all, I would like to really apologize if any of the articles that came out caught you off guard. Our team has appreciated the meetings that we have had in the past with district staff, and we hope to continue to work collaboratively with district staff and welcome any meetings. In the spirit of being transparent, I want to share here tonight that we are planning to submit a charter petition this fall in hopes of creating an entirely new TK through 5th grade school based on the successful Bullis model to serve students in the Mountain View Wisdom School District, with a preference for low-income students. Our hope is to be collaborative and to be authorized by you, the Mountain View Wisdom School District Board. We are doing this because we feel confident that the parents residing in the school district want this school, as evidenced by the positive support and interest in the community. We also believe that the timing works well and that we can add value at a time of unprecedented enrollment growth in the district. With the increase in enrollment, we think that that will actually be a benefit and that more teachers will be needed in the coming years. And so part of this is to ensure that no teacher's job is lost in the process and it doesn't impact negatively on district schools. Finally, we want to contribute to your forward-thinking strategic plan and share, and we see a direct connection between our focus on STEAM and personalized learning. I want to be short on time, so I just wanted to come here tonight to share with you a little bit in person and let you know that I really welcome collaboration, meetings with you, input on the charter petition. We really seek to partner with you and be collaborative. And so I just want to thank you for your time and your commitment to public education. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bryan, Ms. Pinelli. Okay, moving along to moving action. The first item on the agenda is the public hearing resolution number 01090618, resolution on sufficiency of pupil textbooks and instructional materials aligned to the academic content standards and consistent with content cycles of state frameworks 2018-19. Ms. Bauer.
Thank you. Each year, the governing board is required to hold the annual public hearing and adopt a resolution stating that each pupil in the district has sufficient textbooks and instructional materials. Included in your packet is a copy of the public hearing notice and posting at Senate sites since August, as well as the resolution. And so tonight, we're asking you to hold that public hearing and then approve the resolution to certify that students in our district do have sufficient instructional materials for the 18-19 school year.
Thank you. Trustees, were there any questions? Members of the public, any questions or comments?
I have a question. Do we have any public comments at all come in?
Not to me, no. I have not any.
Thank you.
You actually closed this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If there's no more questions.
I had submitted one in the materials, but I guess I'll talk to you about that. So at 7:09, I'm going to close the meeting of the school district and open the public hearing. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution? Okay,
You can just,
please.
you can just do
No, you asked if there are any comments.
it. Yeah, no, let's rephrase it. We're in the open session, right?
For the public hearing.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
So now if you have any public comments, they're more than welcome to speak up.
Thank you for the guidance.
Sorry about
Were
that.
there any public comments that I got word earlier? No, okay, trustees, any comments or questions? Okay, at 7:10, the public hearing is closed, and now we have a motion to approve.
Sure, I move that the board approve and adopt resolution number 01-090618 people, textbooks, and instructional materials aligned to the academic content standards and consistent with content and cycles of state frameworks as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the motion passes, the motion made by trustee Wheeler and seconded by trustee Gutierrez passes unanimously. Okay, now to board policy number 6145, extracurricular and curricular activities.
Yes. So, policy 6145 states that extracurricular and co-curricular activities enrich the educational and social development and experiences of our students. This policy has to be reviewed annually. There was a very small change in the policy in the first paragraph. The old policy actually listed the prohibited categories of discrimination. The new policy makes that more general. And while I don't have an exact answer, I believe that's so that if categories are added, they don't have to continue to revise the policy. So we're asking tonight that you approve the policy at first reading as presented.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Members of the public, any questions or comments? May I have a motion to approve?
I will move that the board approve board policy number 6145, extracurricular and co-curricular activities at first reading as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
On the motion made by trustee Wilson and seconded by trustee Caldonato, the board policy number 6145 regarding extracurricular and co-curricular activities was approved unanimously. Thank you, trustees. The next item is Slater Elementary School, Vargas, multi-use room project, increment 3, and then 1 of the guaranteed maximum price contract to Rivian Builders.
Great, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to bring tonight for the board's approval amendment to the contract for Rodan for the construction of Slater, aka Vargas, for the MUR. And the change is the $4.2 million expense for the MUR. And just so you know, it's Slater in all state documents for construction, so you'll still hear documents that say Slater, but it is Vargas.
Thank you. Are there any questions, trustees? Members of the public, any comments or questions? Do I have a motion to approve?
I move that the Board of Trustees approve amendment 1 guaranteed minimum price contract for the Slater Vargas Elementary School, Vargas, new construction site work phase 1 project, and authorize the superintendent to sign the site and facilities lease agreements.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, on the motion made by trustee Caldonato and seconded by trustee Wilson, the amendment to the Rodan Builders contract for the Vargas schools approved unanimously. Thank you, trustees. Okay, we're moving to the review and discussion section now, and the first item on the agenda is a study session regarding charter schools. Dr. Rudolph.
It's my pleasure to introduce David Huff from Woback, Huff, Swartz, and Henderson LLP, who will be going over the process for a charter approval. This is the first time that our district has had to do answer a petition, and so it's important to go through the process in preparation for it.
Good evening. So just, it's my first time appearing at this school district for the sports. Thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege to represent this. Just a brief introduction about me. I live and work in LA, although we have a stable practice, obviously, but I work in LA most of the time, and I do a significant amount of work for LA Unified School District. You may know that LA Unified has kind of led the charge for authorization of charter schools. It now has about 1/6 of every authorized charter school in the entire state. I think the number is 277 charter schools currently operating within the school district. And the wave of charter schools really began in the early 2000s. Even though the Charter School Act was passed in 1992, charter schools really couldn't get traction in California because they had no right to access public school facilities. They were mostly operating out of either private school sites, commercial leases, church basements, that kind of thing. And then Proposition 39 came around in 2000, a voter initiative. As part of that voter initiative, charter schools gained the right to share public school space if they met certain requirements. And this really then led to the launching of the charter school movement in California. through the early 2000s up through today. And charter school law, and we're going to be talking about charter school law today. Charter school law is really still in its infancy because of that. There's really very few reported cases. In fact, I think I'm named in half of them, including the only case that the California Supreme Court has actually considered on subject matter that we're talking about tonight. And so it's with that I'm going to be talking to you about what some California courts have said about charter school, but I'm also going to be talking to you about consensus of what the charter school law is and how it's practiced here in California, just based upon what law firms like ours do and how we work with law firms like the very capable firm that represents the Bullitt's Charter School operates, and how we've kind of come together and worked through some gaps in the law, maybe where it's not quite infilled with experience yet. And that's part of the things that I'll be talking to you about tonight as well. So I have a slide presentation here. I think you've received it in advance. I'll be rolling through it, and I would invite any questions that you have as we go through it. Please don't wait to the end. Just jump in and fire away. So let's start with, by the way, if you think it's going along too long or whatnot, just, let it be long. So what is a charter school? That's a pretty basic question, right? It's first and foremost, what's important to understand is a charter school is a public school. It's not a private school, it's a public school. And it operates under a charter, which is really a contract. It's a contract made with its authorizer, potentially you, that outlines what it's going to do and the obligations that it owes to you, the obligations it owes to its students, etc. It'll outline its performance requirements, its finance requirements. It'll outline all of its duties and obligations that are not otherwise set forth in the statutes and regulations on them. What is the authorizing agency? There's only 3 authorizing agencies in California. It's either the local school district where the charter school is located, that's you. It would be your county office of education, should you reject the charter and it choose to authorize it. Or it's the State Board of Education, which, if the county were to reject the charter, that's its last right of appeal to establish its charter, the State Board. And how are charter schools governed? Well, it's kind of a complex question. What I believe Bullis is going to present is an independent charter school model, so I'll focus on that, which is, it's pretty independent. It has its own board, it has its own administration, it's responsible to its community of parents and students. It's almost always, there are very few exceptions in California, but almost always they're organized as a 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Are charter school public schools? Yes, again, they are public schools. Importantly, they receive public funds. They are tuition free, and they're open to any student that wishes to attend. And I'll get to enrollment issues in a bit. They must be non-sectarian in their policies, programs, admission policies, employment practices, and all other operations, just like your schools. All right, so how do charter schools differ from other public schools? Well, first of all, they're exempt from many of the requirements in the education code. And that gives them much greater autonomy when it comes to curriculum, as well as hiring practices.
Can you explain a little bit about the many laws, the specifics, what does that even mean?
I'm sorry?
Can you explain the specifics about the many laws? What laws are we talking about?
So the education code, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's about this thick, right? And I would say that that education code includes the laws that govern community college districts in the University of California, so it's not all that thickness is you. But I'd say about that much thickness is you. And of this much thickness, I'd say about that much thickness governs charter schools. That's the way to put it. In exchange for the increased autonomy, the charter school must nevertheless follow its charter. Again, it's making a deal with you that it's got to follow. It's not necessarily an insurmountable. It's a pretty easy deal to follow if they're capable and organized, but nevertheless, there are baseline requirements that are pretty bright line. They must demonstrate sound performance in areas of academic achievement, as well as governance and financial management, very important. And if they consistently fail, unlike public schools, if the charter school's failing in one of these criteria, they can be closed. You know, our public schools, it's very rare that a public school closes due to, let's say, academic achievement. And sometimes public schools close because of under-enrollment. But that's one reason. There's a Stanford study out there that talks about, you know, we see these ideas of test scores in charter schools in general versus public school education in general. Well, there's a Stanford study that talked about how, well, we need to study that data a little more closely because bad charter schools close. And so, whereas, you know, challenged public schools remain open.
I have a question, I'm sorry.
Uh-huh.
For the point that says if they consistently fail to perform, what does consistently fail mean? Is that within a given academic year, all 2 quarters, or all 3 quarters? Or is it on a yearly basis? The first year they don't make it, the second year they don't make it, and then they're done? Is there an example of what that means?
Sure. So it's, you're gonna hear me say this a few times tonight. It's the I know it when I see it test. In the sense of, you know, it's how bad is it versus how, or has it been, you know, bad for a long time or just super bad for one semester? It's hard to answer that question in the way you said it because it could be a myriad of facts that build, you know, that allows you to reach that conclusion. But it's not simply 1 semester or 2 semesters. You have an annual oversight responsibility. You have an annual oversight responsibility, and that oversight can be rigorous if it needs to be. You have, you know, monthly visits and continuous dialogue and inquiry with your charter school that you've authorized. But there's no like statutory time period, like fail for 60 days or fail for 3 months or you know, and what constitutes failure. These are subjective determinations that are made based upon the facts presented by, you know, whatever that challenge is that's giving cost upon.
And who makes that decision about the failure?
You as the authorizer. You have, so we'll get to this. The authorizer has oversight responsibility, not just oversight right. I want to be clear on this. It's not just the right to oversee. As you authorize, you have the responsibility to oversee. And you have the responsibility to make sure that academic achievement is being maintained, that the money is flowing in and out in the right directions, etc. So
how often are charter school decisions to be revoked challenged in court?
Very rarely.
Okay.
Very rarely. So, and I can talk about revocation. I'll get to that later. Revocation is uncommon. So once a charter, but since we're here, let's stop and pause and talk about it. So, let me give you, for example, I represent Capistrano Unified School District. Capistrano has a very high-performing charter school, very similar to Bullis. 600 kids, very high test scores, parents love the school, kids love the school. The problem is its founder is alleged to have decided to start treating those public funds as perhaps private funds. And it's alleged that perhaps even millions of dollars have walked out of that charter school rather than put back into the classroom. The school district made findings with regard to that and was about to revoke the charter school. And parents of that community got together, swept in as a new board, brought in a new administrator, clean slated the school from all relationships that were of its original founders, with the idea that, and I think the point is, with the idea that the school was still serving 600 in-district students. And the parents in the community and ultimately the school board decided they didn't want to interrupt the trajectory of those students just because perhaps some individual adults didn't act like adults. And so even though there was grounds for revocation very clearly under the Charter Schools Act, the school district instead, in essence, put them on probation. and said that we're not going to revoke you today, but here's your performance criteria that you must meet. And we're talking about there's a bunch of independent accounting and new administration, et cetera. And if you meet these benchmarks, we recognize you have an entirely new board. We recognize you swept away the old administration, the old guard, so to speak. We'll let the kids remain because that's in the best interest of the kids. So there's an example of oversight. There's an example of how revocation can work. There's an example of how a school board can choose not to use that power, even though it has that power, but instead do something creative. And thankfully, the Charter Schools Act, again, this is one of the benefits of it being in its infancy, not there being a lot of reported law out there. We thought we kind of had the flexibility to do that, so we did.
But if the school board had chosen instead to revoke, what would the Charter Schools Board's recourse have been?
So that has not been tested. So in my view, it's the writ of mandate arbitrary capricious standard. And so as long as the school board has made evidentiary findings that support its decision-making process under the statute, I think that a charter school has a pretty high bar to overcome, and from a judicial standpoint, to fight that revocation.
What did you say that about the bar was remained for that?
Oh, it's called the arbitrary capricious standard. It's the standard of review by a court sitting in a writ of mandate proceeding where the school district is alleged to have not followed a statutory duty or violated a statutory duty. And it's different. It's a different standard of proof than, say, like I heard you just have a change order agreement where you just have to breach a contract, perhaps with that contractor. That's a different burden of proof. It's much higher.
Okay, thank you.
And that's the example, and that is the example instead of where you just have dispute resolution between, a commercial dispute over how much a change order might be. Here, that's where the court, in order to take action, is in essence giving the agency deference, saying, I'm not going to do your job. I'm a judge. You're the one that's supposed to be administrating the thing. So I'm not going to do your job or reverse your decisions unless I find them to be with arbitrary and capricious, without evidentiary support. That's it.
And when it's presented in that form for the writ of mandate, is there or is there not a mediation option?
There's always a mediation option in any civil dispute.
Okay.
And that comes to, so let me tell you how we got there since we're here. So there's a change of law in 1977. So prior to 1977, school districts could only do what the legislature said it could do. In other words, the education code said that if the education code said you can do X, then you can do X. But if the education code was silent about X, you didn't have the power to do X. Well, that was a bad idea. That's a bad way to go. It's the wisdom of the legislature. So they flipped it. And they enacted Education Code Section 35160. And what that says is that you can do anything that is consistent with your public charge, the stewardship of children, your public education purpose, as long as it does not otherwise violate. Right? And this is an example. And then there's a following section that says, hey, we intend this to be liberally construed. Like, go out there and innovate. Right? Just do good for the kids. That's what this statute's about. And that's the power you have as a school board. And that's exactly what Capistrano exercised in this example, where, there wasn't really, there's no law yet that, is designed to specifically capture what they were confronted with. So they just tried to do what was best for the kids. And so we challenged it. Working. All right. Who can enroll in a charter school? So a charter school is just like, it's public school. So it's required to admit all students who wish to attend. Just like you as a public school, they may not discriminate against any student on the basis of ethnicity, national origin, gender, or disability. And if more students, unlike you, however, you have, as a public school district, you have to take all kids that are within your district that are eligible to attend your school, you have to take them. Right? Charter school doesn't. So if more students apply than the school can accommodate, then entitlement to enrollment is based on random drawing. That's a public lottery that takes place. All right, who can enroll in a charter school? same topic. So charter schools are allowed to establish a preference. And I've read that maybe Bolus's petition will outline a preference policy based upon socioeconomic status. I don't know, but that is permitted. But there are restrictions on that. And you'll see there, the second bullet point, you can't limit enrollment to students with disabilities, academically low achieving students, English learners, neglected or delinquent students, homeless students, or students who are economically disadvantaged. In other words, you can't limit enrollment to exclude those categories. But there is no prohibition, there's no corollary prohibition that says you cannot establish a preference for admission of those categories.
A preference, I mean, that may be preferred, but if, let's say, I don't know what the application is going to say, that Ms. Anderson Rossi just tonight said that they were going to have a preference for low income or low socioeconomic status. So let's say they want 50%, I don't know what it would be, but I assume that there'd be some kind of a threshold in the application, and if they fall short of that, do they still move forward, or how does that work? If it's,
Well,
Is it a weighted balance?
sure, I understand the question. So I think the model should be that their preference is, first they'll take all comers in that category. And if, once they take all comers in that category, if there are still open seats, let's say there's still 50 open seats, but there's 100 kids that want to attend that don't qualify in that preference criteria, then there's a public lottery to fill the remainder of those seats. Let's see, very important, this was an issue, charter schools may not require mandatory parental involvement. And yeah, there's the vote, and that's just what I picked up on the internet. So who attends charter schools? Your students. Now also, the charter school may enroll out of district students. There's no, just like you can permit in out of district students. A charter school may enroll out of district students, but the concept of in-district students becomes important when we get to the question of facilities that I'll discuss later. So how are charter schools funded? The exact same way you're funded. They receive the same state and local tax dollars based upon the number of in-district students that attend their school that you do. It's just that simple.
so because we're community funded, if the charter school were to choose to admit students who are not in district, do they get any less funding? I mean,
No, the ADA, so that student has ADA attached, average daily attendance funding attached to it, no matter where it attends, right? So let's say it's from a neighboring school district that is not community funded. So the state funds that student, wherever that student attends. If that student travels into your district but attends Bullis, that funding follows that student.
Okay. Do we then supplement it to make it equal the amount of every other student within our district from our local funds? Otherwise, they're underfunded.
No, I don't believe so.
Do they get to use our local parcel taxes to pay for those children?
No. I don't think so, because I don't believe it's part of the parcel tax initiative. I have to look at how yours is written.
Taxpayers expected to pay for children.
So, but in general, just think of this way: the funding follows the student. Must charter schools teachers hold teaching credentials? Generally, yes. There are some subjects in which they do not need to be credentialed, but for the most part, yes. Do charter schools take money away from public schools? Question I'm asked all the time. Yes, they do. But we have to balance our sentiments. I'm just asking you kind of balance our sentiments about that. I know that's a charged question and a charged concept, but you know, the public money is meant for the child, and you know, where the child attends a public school, that public school is to receive the money. So we have to think about this not just as, I know we're here thinking about our school district and what this means for our school district, but at the same time, we have to think about the child and the purpose of public education.
I think we get that. So in terms of the money, what kind of money are we talking about? Title I, Title II, what is it?
The money follows the child.
All
No.
of it. And they don't get back to us about the parcel tax number.
Yeah, I have to get that. But I think the answer is no, but I have to follow up. I have to look that question. But I'm pretty sure the answer is no. I have to see how it's written.
As far as Title I, right now, we have a threshold where we say the schools don't have that percentage of kids that are below the median, free-reduced lunch average for the county. So basically, right now, only 2 schools in our district are getting Title I monies. We don't allocate them per rate per kid. Does that change that formula?
It might, because if the student otherwise qualifies for Title I funding, then that funding will likely follow the student. So now, one way that, I know that Polis is very successful.
Speak into the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
You can take
I'm
it
used-
there.
yeah,
You can pick it up and.
Yeah. Just
I'm
like
used to kind of working the room, right?
Yeah.
So I move around a little bit.
ladies and gentlemen of the
Yeah.
jury.
Exactly. Put me in a spot. So, you talk about community funding, and I understand how this school district is community funded as well. I think Polis receives a large portion of its funding in Los Altos from its community, meaning its parents. In fact, I read that it receives half of its funding from its parents. So just like your school district, I think the charter school will find a way to be funded by more than just the state and local and federal dollars that maybe otherwise being funded. How are charter schools established? You heard that you're going to receive a petition. I'm going to lob a strong guess that it's going to be before November 1st for a reasonable discuss, that you'll receive this petition. And you must review the petition. I'm going to get to what that means. So what must a charter petition contain in their approval? So this is an important thing, is that the petition must meet certain minimum requirements, or you don't even need to consider it. My guess is that the Polis petition will meet these requirements. They're a well-organized charter school, they're well represented. I think they know how to present a petition, and I'm gonna again hazard the guess that it's going to meet these requirements. And they're all very clearly delineated in the education code. It's at 47605, in case you're wondering. And so, in general, so it's elements required by law. I'll follow that up in a minute. General information about schools, such as where they intend to locate, their first-year operational budget, startup costs, cash flow. They need to show you not only their educational program, but how fiscally they're going to be able to operate. And this is where the slides get a little detailed, and I can get granular on this if you'd like, but what are the required elements of the charter petition? There's actually 15 of them in Education Code 47605. And so, and frankly, the first one is the most important. And that's the one where a lot of school districts find trouble approving a charter petition. Most of the other ones, you'll see charter schools usually are able to not find too much difficulty justifying. But it's the description of the educational program of the school. The charter school and goals and its proposed charter will serve what students it intends to serve, and if so, how it's going to do that, and particularly these with regard to high school students. But the real focus is, what's its educational program? What's it going to do? What's its model? What's its theory? And how is it going to implement it? This is where school districts really examine the merit of a charter petition and whether it's going to responsibly provide a competitive alternative to your community for public education.
And going back to that word you just used, alternative. How alternative?
Great question.
Enough.
Yes, got it. It can be identical. It can just be, I think I can do what you do better. It can be that. It can also offer, some sort of dual immersion that you're not offering. I don't do, but it's, or some sort of engineering program or some sort of arts program, or it can offer, there can be all sorts of platforms that a charter school may be based on, or it can just be, I can compete with you and do better. So the petition must, like I said, it must contain 15 elements, including measurable student outcomes, how they're going to evaluate whether the student is meeting those outcomes, the governance structure, which is something we'll pay close attention to, but because that's come up as a problem for charter schools recently. Again, I'm going to hazard a guess that they've got that figured out. And the qualifications, health and safety of the kids, the means by which they're going to achieve a demographic balance, admission requirements, if any, the manner in which financial audits are going to be done. And so like this element number 9, this is a very important element. It's really important from an oversight perspective, but I just have to tell you at this point, it's pretty crucial. I mean, they know how to put it down on a piece of paper such that it meets the statutory. Disciplinary procedures for students, whether it's how the employees are going to be covered under STIRS and PERS, public school alternatives for students residing within the district who chose not to attend the charter school, a description of the rights of any employees of the school district upon leaving their employment.
But going back to 12, can you elaborate on that a little bit more? The public school alternatives. for students.
Sure, so just accommodations. So like, do they offer like perhaps online courses or things along those natures, for students perhaps that have individual needs?
So let's talk about medically fragile, just to throw one out there. Is that something where, I mean, how would that?
Well, that's up to the charter school to define for you, right? It's how do we approach kids that in need? What are our programs? What's our concepts? You'll see that. Let's see. Proposed alternative dispute resolution provisions. If we as the school district have a dispute with them, or they have a dispute with us, and procedures for closing. Again, that's another cookie cutter thing that's all they can do. So, what is the procedure? Part of that slide got cut off a little bit, but I think what it says is, what's the procedure for the district's approval of the charter petition? And so, there's some pretty strict timelines. This thing has to move pretty fast. And let me just stop there for a minute and just say this. And it's something to really keep in mind as a grounding principle. This body of law, as well as Proposition 39, are weighted to the charter schools. They were drafted by charter school advocates and passed in a way that, while certainly have checks and balances that give the school districts some power in this process, the law is favored for the benefit of the charter schools. Here's an example of it. The petition process moves quite quickly. The governing board of the school district must hold a hearing of the proposed charter within 30 days of receiving the charter petition. During the hearing, the governing board of the school district must consider the level of support by your teachers, your employees, and your community. And what's interesting about that is that, so you read that, it's right there in the law, that you have to do this. But actually, it doesn't have really any meaning at all. And it's unfortunate, frankly. Because like I heard a speaker prior to me coming up urge you to reject the charter petition. And that, even though you're required to consider the level of your community support, actually the statute doesn't allow you to use that as one of your bases to reject the petition. Here's an example of where the charter school law is actually written in the charter school's favor. It looks like it's a fair and balanced process where you as a school board can, hey, let's listen to our community. And if they really don't want this church, you know, the vast majority of the community doesn't want the charter school, maybe we can reject the petition on that basis. Well, I'm going to show you later what the statute actually says on how you can reject a charter school petition, and you're not going to find that in there. So now the school district must approve or deny the charter within 60 days of the receipt of the petition. You are allowed to ask for, you may ask for a 30-day extension of that, but if the charter school says no, it's no. And you have 60 total days from the time of submission to either accept or reject the petition.
And is that business days or just days, including holidays? Including holidays.
Calendar days. So, how long is the charter? Well, there actually is a maximum term, it's 5 years. That's the maximum amount of period charter can be granted for. So, can a charter school deny a charter petition? I'm sorry, can a school district deny a charter petition? We're at the crux here. Here's what the law says. You must approve the petition. You must approve the petition unless you can provide a written factual finding supporting one or more of the following conclusions. One, the charter school presents an unsound educational program. Coming back to that first requirement of the charter petition we talked about. And this is usually where most school districts land in a way to reject the petition for whatever reason they find. The petitioner is demonstrably unlikely to successfully implement their program. The petition does not contain the signatures of at least 1/2 of the number of teachers that the charter school estimates will be employed at the school district in its first year of operation, and or the signatures of the parents or legal guardians of at least 1/2 of the number of students that the charter school estimates to enroll in its first year of operation.
And on the teacher signatures, is that teachers currently employed by our district? Or
No.
is that?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think you think it was just under, or is that any teacher that will be employed by the charter school, and it's the latter. It's let's say the charter school says, hey, I'm going to employ 28 teachers, we need 14 teachers and say, I'm going to work there.
Okay, so just any teachers.
Any teacher.
And so to just make sure I understand, Bolas Charter School has more than 14 teachers. It could just be 14 that work for Bolas Charter School, could sign that.
Well, so this would be part of the dialogue we would have with the charter school during the petition process. That may be the case, but boy, that's certainly going to leave a vacuum over in Los Altos. I'm not sure that community would be so happy with it, and that's a realistic proposal, right?
Are they legally bound unless they sign that? It doesn't create a vacuum unless they're legally bound to do it.
I agree. So here's the problem with that, is that unfortunately the Charter Schools Act does not give us like the right to audit, like the right to rescind if they didn't follow through with that. And I think the reason for that is that, you know, I guess it's conceivable a teacher can change his or her mind. You know, they signed the petition, and maybe they even did so with all the best intentions of the world, and circumstances in their own life changed, and they decided, you know what, I want to stay where I am, or I'm moving to Michigan. You know, maybe that's the reason that we don't see that, but, you know, this is one of those things where we just really have to hope that they're working in good faith, and they're actually presenting, you know, they've done their own due diligence with the people that have signed the petition, and they're meaningfully interested either in sending their kids or being employed there.
So this same holds true then for the signatures of parents or legal guardians. They may not even be in non-US school district or BDLs or socioeconomically disadvantaged. We cannot verify or audit, is that what you're?
Yeah, actually, there was a trial court decision recently, and I think the time just passed where it could be appealed, but I don't think it was appealed, that touched upon this question, and it was critical of the school district's efforts to kind of really dig into the parental signatures and expression of being meaningfully interested. And so this is an unresolved area of the law, truthfully. But here's the thing, again, we hope that the charter schools act in good faith, and if they say that they're going to open with 150 kids, they got 75 moms and dads that say they're going to send kids there, that meets the statutory minimum. These elements, frankly, are the easiest elements for the charter school to satisfy in the petition process. So here we go. These are other reasons. Again, here are requirements set forth in the law. Rarely do you see them being the ones that trip up the charter schools. For example, they must make affirmations that they won't discriminate. And I'm sure they'll do that. A reasonably comprehensive description of the 15 elements mandated by the Education Code. Again, I know Melissa's lawyers very well. I can go from one of those to the daily basis. And I can tell you they know how to draft a petition that satisfies those requirements. The petition does not contain a declaration of whether or not it will be deemed the exclusive public employer or of the employees of the charter school, meaning will they be unionized or not.
So they just have to say we will or we won't.
Mm-hmm. All right, so what happens if a school district denies a charter petition? The chart, you lose, you're done. So if you deny the charter petition, you're done. You're out of the process as far as the petition goes. And then they have the right to take that petition and submit it to the county Office of Education. One thing that we've been seeing, and it's yet to be tested before the courts yet, is whether or not they can augment the petition that they take to the county. It can be still the same core petition, but we've seen some charter schools actually take that petition and go, gee, that school district is kind of right. We were a little light here on this description of this particular element of our platform, and they augment it. We'll take it to the county goes, hey, that looks good, right? And they approve it. And then if they approve the charter, I'll get into that in a minute, well, that has some consequences for you as a school district that are very real. And again, if the county Board of Education were to reject the charter petition, they do have the right to go to the State Board of Education.
How often does that happen?
So less and less often. For a while it was happening because school boards were, well, to be frank, they didn't want charter schools. And they were finding ways to make findings, and perhaps those findings were in good faith that, for whatever reason, they meet statutory requirements. There's been a very active lobbying and political push by charter school advocates to endorse candidates and push candidates in the county offices of education, as well as governors that are very friendly to the charter school movement and have filled positions within the State Board of Education that are those that are pro-charter schools. And what that did is that created a landscape that was very pro-charter. And so school districts started seeing where when they would reject a charter school petition, they did approve it the next one. And after that,
We have also supported school board candidates.
So now there have been some instances, and I would say far less than, much more less than those that get approved, but there have been actually some charter petitions that fail at all three levels. It does occur. I would likely lose a strong bet if that would happen. So now, what is a school district's role in working with charter schools as a charter operator? You will be, if you approve the charter petition, what are your roles? So your role is to review petitions for new charter schools. You also then, at the end of the term of the charter, let's say you approve the charter for a 5-year term, you will then have the responsibility to review what's known as a renewal petition, where they have to go through much of the same exercise. It's kind of a refresh where they're saying they justify again their existence, and they examine and explain all the good things they've done and how they envision themselves moving forward. Now, there's a thing called material revisions. Oftentimes, charter schools want to change something. Maybe they want to change their grade levels. Maybe expand from K-8 to K-12. Maybe they want to expand their enrollment from 400 kids to 600 kids. Maybe they want to change their governance structure and add, instead of having 5 trustees, have 7 trustees. Maybe they want to there's a whole host of things that are in the charter as required by law that they might want to change. If they want to change that, they have to come ask you. And that's called a material revision. So the way, and this is again, a lot of untested stuff, still, charter school law in its infancy. The way that we practice material revision is, if it's required by the statute or the regulation, it's required as an element of the charter, and you want to change your charter school, that's material revision. If it's not required by the statute or the regulation, it's not required. And then you have oversight of the charter school of your authority. All right, so this is an important question. Can a charter school authorized by your county office of education or the state board of education locate in your school district if you deny the charter? And the answer is unequivocally yes. You will have the charter school, even if you reject the petition, if your county office approves it or the state board approves it, you have the absolute right to locate here. And that includes using your public school facilities.
You said right, but it says must.
Okay, so it's must, but the reason I say right is because some charters are what's called countywide charters, where they're not just your district specific, so it's kind of an omnibus slide. I'm sorry for the intellectualness of it, but that's the answer. So, is the school district required to provide facilities for all charter school students? So, this is where we get into what's called Proposition 39, Prop 39. And so, if a new petitioner wants to locate on your public school facilities, then they must submit their petition as well as their facilities request on or before November 1st. And if they submit this facilities request on or before November 1st, you are required to make available to any charter school operating in your school district facilities sufficient to accommodate all of the charter schools in district students in conditions that are reasonably equivalent to those which students would be accommodated if they were otherwise attending your district schools. So I've been talking about, one of the big questions we always have to talk about is what is reasonable equivalence? So if you have questions about that, I can go on.
We have questions about that.
Okay, well, yeah, fire away when you're ready.
What does it mean? Or do you want to wait until you get there?
Let me finish these two bullets and I'll get to it. So now importantly, the corollary is you are not required to provide facilities to students not residing in your district. So let's say some kids from the existing Bullis charter schools that are Los Altos kids maybe, or some other area. I mean, down at LA Unified, we have kids that literally come from 80 zip codes to one charter school, right? And so there's some in-district kids in that pool of kids, and there's some out-of-district kids that come. And the school district is only obligated to provide a seat for every in-district kid. You may choose to provide more under what could be called an alternative agreement. You may choose to provide more seats. But if you're impacted, or you otherwise don't want to, for whatever reason, you are not required to. Charter schools often acquire private facilities to either augment their public school space or because they don't want to co-locate. Co-location brings a lot of headaches for both school communities, both for the charter school and for the host school site. And so sometimes charter schools choose to acquire private facilities. I don't know what the intent of this is here. So, talking about reasonable equivalence, here's this next bullet point, which is public school facilities must be shared fairly by all public school students, including those in the charter schools. And this means that a school district must provide classroom space to a charter school, the same ratio of classrooms to average daily attendance as that provided to students at district operating schools with similar grade levels. This was the Supreme Court case that we won for LA Unified. This was where CCSA sued LA Unified and said, hey, you're driving your student ratios by the number of teachers. And if you've got empty classrooms over here on this campus that are not being used, and I have a charter school that maybe has the funding to have a student-teacher ratio of 15:1, you need to give me classrooms. You must give me classrooms at a ratio of 15:1, regardless of the ripple effect that causes at the host campus and the other campuses that might be affected. And the Supreme Court rejected that idea, instead stated this principle, which is that it's reasonably equivalent. The charter school's landscape is going to look like the school district's landscape. So if you're loading your classrooms at 32:1 in the 8th grade, then and if they want public school space from you to be co-located on a public school site, then they get classrooms at 32:1. Even if they have a program that can support 15:1, they get 32:1. And that's part of reasonable equivalence. What else is reasonable equivalence? And what is sharing fairly? Well, it's this multi-purpose room. Let's say that they co-locate on this campus, and let's say that they have 8 classrooms over there somewhere. And that doesn't mean that you can deny them access to this multi-purpose room. You must share it fairly with them. And basically how you share fairly is you count how many kids are in their school community and how many kids are in your school community, and you figure out what that means on a percentage basis, and then the 2 principals get together and work it out. And maybe Tuesdays, and Thursday afternoons, this multi-purpose room is theirs. And the same goes for the playing fields. The same goes for if you have a computer lab. And the same goes if you have a science lab. The same goes if you have a parent resource room. And the same goes, so where are the difficulties? Let's talk about now the difficulties. This school, and I would hazard all of your schools in your school district, were not designed to host 2 school communities. They were not built with 2 principals' offices. They were not built with 2 nursing stations. They're not built with 2 libraries, right? So there's difficulty in practically implementing this concept of sharing fairly. And so it doesn't mean that your principal's the principal gets the office Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And the charter school principal gets the Tuesdays and Thursdays. Well, what it's likely going to mean, and this is where it becomes an impact on your host schools, is that you're going to have to dedicate a classroom to providing an administrative space. So that's one less classroom to allocate to the education. And let's say that you have another classroom that's dedicated to full-time as a resource center for special education kids or EL kids or something like that. Well, now you're going to have to, work out sharing that space fairly. Because the charter school, if their demographics are the same as the school districts, which they should be, it's likely going to have that same kind of student population. It's going to need those same resources. And so you have to share the space fairly in order to allow them to implement their program for those kids as well. So that's sharing fairly. This is where really the rubber hits the road in the relationship between school districts in particular, where it gets really down to your local school community, where the 2 principals must be able to work together and figure it out.
But it's all about space. It's not about like you don't have to share the school nurse if you have.
That's absolutely right. So, and that becomes a problem. If you have 2 school nurses in one spot, that can become a problem. Again, in the vast majority of circumstances, we're able to figure it out. But it's not, it never works out as being ideal for either the host school or the charter school. There are going to be some compromises on both sides.
And that would also be true for the cafeteria use and for the library use and.
Right, the one place that actually we were able to beat back this concept of sharing fairly, believe it or not, was kitchens. Now, I'm sorry, I don't know how you operate a food program here. But the law is written that we actually have to share the kitchen as well. Well, actually, if you end up sharing your kitchen, you're probably going to run afoul of your federal food program, because you can't commingle 2 different food programs under your free and reduced lunch reimbursement protocol. So we've actually been able to convince trial court, hey, that just doesn't work. If you make us comply with this law, we violate that law. So most times, it becomes very difficult if you have warning tables and pass through. I mean, you can't blend your food, right? You know, so, and it doesn't really work either to have the entire school, your entire in-district school population feed through the food service lines, break those down, clean them, and then have the charter school set up and implement the same thing. There's not enough time for both programs to do that fairly, right? That becomes it's unfair to charter school if they have to start feeding the kids at 1:30. That's not fair. That's not good for the kids, right? And it's unfair to us if we have to start feeding at 10:45 in order to accommodate their lunch program. So we're going to have to, if they're going to want to co-locate on a school, we're going to have to figure out a food program. One way that it's done throughout California is actually the charter school just kind of buys into the district's food program and pays the same rate that the school district charges the students, et cetera. Some charter schools set up their own independent meal delivery and have warming ovens. We give them dedicated space for warming ovens, and they find a way to dispense it. One thing you have to figure out though is you maybe only have so much covered space for kids to eat on, right? And so it's do the two programs try to share that space just kind of ad hoc? Do they try to stay inside your new programs? There's a whole host of coordination issues that present themselves. Again, not insurmountable, can be worked out. Again, but I'm just highlighting as just one difficulty in the whole host of operational challenges that we have. So how do charter schools get entitled to public school facilities under the law? Well, they have to first provide you a reasonable projection of how many kids they expect to attend the school that next year. In the first year, that's pretty easy to do. Year after year, if they, let's say the first year they have 150 kids, and then the second year they project 300 kids, well, that actually creates additional requirements under the regs for actually justifying that kind of leap in enrollment. But for the most part, the projection process is pretty well defined amongst how it's being practiced. They must have, they're going to have to demonstrate that they're going to have at least 80 kids in order to qualify for space in the first year. They have to provide either calendar, because you have to know when you have to make space available to them. It's got to be 10 days before the first day of instruction. And they have to identify where they wish to be located. There's the 80-day requirement. The process goes like this. We go through that projection process where they project.
Wish to be located, that's just in your district?
Yes. So the legal requirement is they must be located near where they wish to be located. So I was the lawyer that established the concept of near in the California Appellate Courts. That was the case I had to litigate. And near is given a pretty broad, has a very broad and liberal definition. There's one thing that's in favor of school districts, is that there is, at its heart, displacement of neighborhood kids out of the neighborhood schools could be a really difficult thing to do, right? Especially if you think about what the real world impact that makes for families, single moms trying to get the kids to school before they're going to work, families that rely upon the ability to walk their kids to work because they rely on public transportation themselves. If you displace parents out of their neighborhoods, out of their kids' neighborhood schools, it's been demonstrated that you actually lose some parental involvement in that school community, for example. So there's a lot of real world harm to displacing kids out of their neighborhood schools. And so that's one factor in in determining whether to locate you must make the effort to locate the charter school where it wishes to be located. So the charter school, I'm sure Melissa is going to say, hey, I'd like to be at this school versus that school, my third choice school of the year. And you then can go through the process of just determining, what would that mean for, let's first look at school number one. Can we fit them on there? And if we can't fit them on there, we have to decide why. Be very clear and transparent as to why. Then let's look at school number two. And then let's look at school number three. Here's the good news for you though. You're also left with the responsibility to locate them near where they wish to be located. Right? Well, you don't have that very distance. Right? And this case law was actually made now unified, and so that's the framework in which this law was generated, and near is given a pretty broad definition of that. And I don't think, frankly, given the size of your school district and its geographic boundaries, that really, no matter where they put them, it's probably near where they wish to be located. So I don't think you have to worry about that as much as perhaps other larger school districts have to worry about that requirement. But because, for example, case law has been very clear that 5 miles is near.
I have a quick question. In terms of their wishes for being at a certain school, how many options do they have to give to us? Is there a limit, or can they just do like less than 5 or 3, or how does that work?
It's completely undefined in the law. Most charter schools get at least 3, in my experience, but they can get 1. And then see where the ball lands if you don't give them that one. Or that some charter schools list 8, 10, and whatever. There's no rule about this.
I have one more question. I'm sorry. On slide 19, the header is, what is the maximum term of a charter? The bullet point then says a charter may be granted for a period not to exceed 5 years. Does that mean that we have flexibility to do a minimum?
So you can, but it's really, they're going to request 5 years. You don't have to, we can talk about modifications of the charter petition as conditions of approval. It's not actually something that's expressed in the statute, but school districts and charter schools, in an effort to compromise and getting the petition off the ground, are doing it more and more. But the term, I would say that almost all charter petitions that are being approved today are being approved for 5 years. And it's hard to be, we'd have to make and find justification for doing something less than that if the petitioner requested 5 years.
So the law is not specific to a minimum, it just gives a maximum.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And just furthering that comment, conditional approval is not something that's, either you negotiate with the charter and you reach some kind of agreement and they modify it and then that's what you approve. You can't just say, well, we'll approve it conditionally based on, we're imposing this condition, take it or leave it. That's not something that.
So yes, you can do that. And what it is tantamount to a rejection. It's really a rejection unless they accept the compromise.
So it would have to be based on those factors.
Correct. So, but the thing is, you might find that the charter petition, for whatever reason, is lacking. Let's say it's lacking in its identification of how it's going to fiscally operate and particular budgetary controls. So you might find that your educational professionals study and say, hey, look, the platform is really weak in EL requirements, something, right? And so you can say, we're going to reject your petition based on that, and because we find that you're unlikely to succeed because your finances are not working right or whatnot. But if you make these corrections, it's an acceptance. That's what we call really conditional approval. So really conditional approval is kind of oxymoron. It's actually rejection unless. Because again, because the Charter Schools Act doesn't really only contemplate acceptance or rejection. So your action has to be one or the other. And so we've kind of taken this step, and we've done it in several districts, and charter schools have gone along with it, because again, there has to be collaboration between the two parties, right? It has to, if the relationship is going to be successful and collaborative. And so it's one way that that kicks off that it's not set, or in the renewal process. So the Proposition 39 process in a nutshell is you go through the projection process where you try to define how many kids am I going to allocate for. That happens in November or December or January. And then in February, you have the obligation to make what's called a preliminary proposal, where you say, I'm going to give you X amount of classrooms at the Y school site. And you identify where those, what the school site is, where the location of those classrooms are going to be, and you identify generally your conditions for sharing the space there. By March 1st, they must respond to that preliminary proposal and let you know what they might object to, as well as provide any suggestions or differences to it. So there's an opportunity to both object as well as to say, hey, can you also do this for us or do this different? Two different ways to approach it. And then on April 1, you make what's called the final notification. And that's it. Your decision is actually, that's take it or leave it. It's, here's your final notification space. It's going to be at this school. And by the way, it doesn't actually have to be at the school you preliminary proposed. Circumstances may have changed, or they may have said something in their March 1 that made you change your mind. But your final notification is just that. It's where you're going to be. And then by May 1, they have to tell you that they're either going to take it or leave it. Now, one thing they can do is, if you do, in your final notification, offer them 10 classrooms, they can take it. They can take less than what you want. Kind of in a nutshell, there's May 1. And you guys enter, so if they want your space, they have to execute what's called a facilities use agreement. And some people refer to it as a lease, but it's not a lease. You are not leasing this space at all. It's a facilities use agreement. So a different way to provide public school space to a nonprofit corporation that's authorized by law to do it this way. And that facilities use agreement will detail all of the conditions of sharing, including how this room will be shared. Now, I'll skip to the last bullet point first because it's the bottom line. You can't charge them rent. The law requires that the space be given substantially rent-free. But you may charge them what's called the pro rata share, which is you figure out, and there's a way to do it, how much does it cost to operate this school? I mean, how much does it cost for the lights and the water and the landscaping and the deferred maintenance and all of those things? And then we figure out, well, how much of the school are you using? And that's the pro rata share of that cost. And they're required to pay. So they don't get the school for free, they get it at cost, is what they get it at. And then we have to work out arrangements for maintenance, insurance, debt service, et cetera, as well. So I covered this already. If they co-locate on a public school space, do they share the space? The answer is yes, and they're entitled to share all of your non-exclusively occupied classroom space. So what does that mean? If you've got a teacher in a first grade classroom, they don't have right to that classroom. That's your exclusive use space that you can use it for that first grade purpose. But do they get access to this multi-purpose room? Absolutely. Library? Yes. Playing fields? Yes. And again, it really comes down to being able to negotiate a schedule that makes both programs successful. And here again, it's what types of space are shared, like I just said. If you have any computer labs, science labs, multi-purpose rooms, play areas, etc., you must share those. So how are charter schools monitored to ensure compliance with their charters and existing law? So this comes back to you approve the charter or you reject it, and it elevates to the County Office of Education or otherwise. Because if you don't approve the charter, this slide doesn't apply to you anymore. You lose your right of oversight. All you become is, in essence, the landlord. And so a school district that does approve the charter, that is the authorizer, you can have the statutory obligation to exercise certain oversight responsibilities. And the education code specifically requires you to identify at least one staff person to serve as the liaison with the charter school. You must visit the charter school at least annually. I will tell you that most school districts that take their oversight responsibilities seriously visit charter schools much more often than annually. They ensure the charter school complies with all reporting requirements required by law, attendance reporting, grade reporting, etc. Monitor the fiscal condition of the charter school, very important because, and provide timely notification to the Department of Ed if you revoke or grant a renewal or extension of the charter. Are you compensated for those oversight responsibilities? I mean, clearly now here's a new administrative burden that you weren't doing the day before you approved the charter. And the answer is yes. You're compensated for your actual costs up to either 1% or 3% of the charter school's ADA funding. The difference being that you get 1% if they occupy private school space. In other words, they don't occupy space on any of your public schools. And you, in essence, get 3% if they co-locate on one of your school campuses. While it requires that the statute is actually written in its concept of actual costs, I would say the practices generally is that charter schools just rather than go through that accounting process, which would be pretty detailed, they in essence either pay the 1%.
Mr. Another question. So if we say, if the board were to say no, and then it's appealed, and at that point it's approved, at that point, is it will we lose right of oversight, or?
You lose power of oversight.
Okay, and so then at that point in time, basically, I guess that's how you were trying to explain that the rule basically, or the law basically in favor of the charter school. Because it seems like it's not a win-win situation for the public school.
So
I don't know how that relationship in general is like, I don't know.
So I would say in general, most school districts that reject charter school petition that is thereafter approved by another authorizer, either the county or the state, end up regretting that decision. Losing the oversight responsibility, call it a responsibility and not a power, it's a responsibility, is oftentimes determined to be in hindsight something they wish they didn't do. Because then the school district loses the ability to respond to its community of its public school parents about concerns that I'm sure that will be expressed to you about presence and operation of the charter school. And there oftentimes are questions about what the charter school is doing, and well, I think something X is going on over there, or they're doing Y with their kids. And when you have the oversight responsibility, you can test that theory for yourself. You can visit the school. You can look at their records. You can sit in on a class. You have the ability to, truly be an overseer. And that turns out to be, I think, valuable to a school board when responding to elements of the community that are dissatisfied with the charter school's presence.
And one quick follow-up question. Having you said that, if it's at that level where we lose oversight, but there's a change in the plan of what the charter school will like to do in the future, which would then include the school district's facilities, do they still have to apply that us again, or do they go straight to the State Board of Education?
Got it. So I think what you mean is at the end of the 5-year term, so at the end of the 5-year term, the petition comes back to you, even if you reject it. So even if it's all the way up to the State Board charter, after 5 years, you get the opportunity to become the overseer, to be the authorizer.
Thank you.
Yeah. But again, I want to stress that even if you reject the petition, should the charter school wish to locate on your public school space and have more than 80 kids in its first year of operation, they will have the right to co-locate on one of your campuses, and you must make space available for them that is reasonably equivalent to condition.
Right, and if we approve, then it's something like NEA.
Did you say that? I didn't understand your sentence.
And if we were to approve the charter school, then it would be something that would be kind of NEA.
Well, no, regardless, it's near, but what would be difference is that although you would have the oversight responsibility, you would be able to share in more of the revenues of the charter school.
Thank you for the clarification.
That's it for me. Any other questions?
I have one. On the slide about, okay, the slide that had the 15
elements.
Elements. One of them says it must match the demographics of the district it's locating in. But then, if our district is not 50% free and reduced lunch, then how can a charter application say we're going to be 50% free and reduced lunch? Is that by definition not a match?
So, I understand your question, but let's think about it a little bit more. Because I think the result of enforcement of that would actually be a discriminatory practice. Because, think about it for a minute, right? Because we can't deny enrollment to a public school because you fit a category. And that would be, in essence, what we're doing here. We'd be saying charter school, you must enroll at least 50% students who are that do not have a socioeconomic challenge. And that wouldn't be appropriate. So I think there are tensions. I understand, because like the preference thing gets a little wonky when we talk about as compared to the lottery thing, and we have to really think about these things for a minute to try to implement all aspects of the law. And again, we have to also remember that the Charter Schools Act, it was innovative, right? It was doing something new. And oftentimes when we do something new, things don't quite dovetail as smoothly as we wish they would. So in this instance, though, what the petition requirement is, this is the petition requirement, and that all that is that it's a representation that the demographics of the charter school should match. And whether they, how successful they are in implementing that preference, given what may be your demographics, I don't know. But if it's a preference, it's a preference, and it will give those kids that fit within that category a leg up on attending that school if they want. That's the way to look at it.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question?
Yes.
I have another. Go ahead.
So having said that, I'm wondering, by when will we be able to decipher what the demographic breakdown would be? At what point would we be informed of that, and what would our options be in case it doesn't reflect that?
Well, again, that's where I was talking about how the Charter Schools Act seems to express all of this rigor of requirements for presenting a petition to the school district, but your ability to enforce that rigor is not. It has a lot more bark than it has bite to it, quite frankly. Because the demographics of a particular school may result from a whole host of things. It may result from the community's perception of the school. It may result from the program that the school offers. Perhaps it offers a particular language program that is attractive to one process from the community and not another. So there could be a whole host of reasons why the school's ultimate attendance doesn't match what was expressed in the charter school petition. I really no fault of the charter school.
And so then what?
Well, is that a ground for revocation? We're really ranging into the hypothetical here, but
no, it's just a question about at that point it's an option to explore because it's listed as them describing that to us as a whole, then the promise is true. If that's the question and that's the standard that they have to meet, then what power does the school district really have to either do anything about that? Because it seems to me like it's worse law than anything else.
So again, I understand your question. It's a material question. It's difficult to answer in like this pure hypothetical because I don't know what the there is. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of things that get charged into demographic discussions that I can make assumptions about and answer your question, and I just don't.
No, I said these are speculations. I guess.
What about in the angle of the school financial model? In the event that they were not getting the free and reduced price lunches, kids, they would not be getting all the associated federal funding that goes along with those children. And what if they substantially change their funding model to continue the charter school to operate fiscally responsibly, but they had such a great departure from the original charter contract on how they were going to do that budget. Is that a step for revocation?
No, instead, revocation is like 6 steps down the road, okay? Talking about revocation is not really where we should be beginning discussion, because the first thing that's going to be presented to you is a petition for approval. And you've asked an excellent question. A question that I'm sure Willis's representatives are probably going to respond to in their petition, because they need to tell you how they're going to be fiscally viable. And I think that's a great question. Is that if our preference concept, our preference model meets a particular benchmark, then we expect X revenue and we'll operate, this way and that way. But if our preference model doesn't meet that benchmark, what does that mean for our funding? And how would we respond to that? What things would we have in place? What safeguards do we have in place? What budgetary assumptions have we made in order to accommodate for that? I think that's a great question, and I hope that Willis materially addresses it in the petition.
So another question that occurred to me was, where it said something about the charter school approved and everything. Give notice to the district how many students, what its enrollment will be. Is there no upper bound to how many? I mean, you said something about reasonableness, but if the charter school wanted to grow by 10% every year forever, and they had the students, the applicants to do that, is there any limit to that?
So another really good question. Most charter school petitioners come to you with a pretty, a realistic enrollment cap. That they'll, I have no idea what the intended suggests as their enrollment cap, but to sustain themselves as a viable charter school, if they present a program that says, hey, I'm going to have 1,200 kids. Well, if your total ADA in your school district is 6,000 kids, that's not really a reasonable program, is it? It's an unlikely thing.
Wait, you said 1,200 out of 6,000 is 12,000 out of 6,000.
Exactly.
Whatever number, infeasible.
Yeah. So most charter petitions, they they present a concept known as the cohort survival, where they say the cohort survival method, which is they say, look, in our first year, we're not going to enroll K through. Again, I don't know what they're thinking, okay? But some charter petitions come this way. Say, we're not going to. Our concept is K8, but we're actually going to start K3. And so they infill their school with K3 kids, but then that cohort survives. And now that's first through fourth graders, and they enroll new kindergartners. And as a result, their enrollment increases every year up to when they infill all the way up to K8. And so I don't know whether they intend to operate 3 classes at every grade level, 4 classes at every grade level, or what their classroom loading ratio proposal is going to be. But that's going to drive what their enrollment projection is going to be year by year in their total program. And they're going to express all that to you.
Understood.
Well, I also wanted to thank you for just a very thorough report. I had this long, single-spaced list of questions, and you covered most of them, which I appreciate. But I did want to just delve in a little bit further on a sound or an unsound educational program. That seems like the crux of it. And how do you make that kind of inquiry? I mean, my understanding is that Willis Charter School wants to focus on low-income kids, but they have really no experience in that area. And I don't know, how do you look at benchmarks to see whether it would be sound, whether the program that they propose would be sound for this demographic?
So, okay, I understand your question. And I'm gonna, I'm a lawyer, I'm not a doctor in education, but I've seen doctors in education work on this very question. And for example, there was a school district that I assisted through a charter petition review process where this group of well-intentioned people thought they would come up with this dynamic new charter school, and they presented this platform with 3 different educational concepts. And the superintendent of the school district that it was presented to happened to be a kind of an education wonk, and she said, That can't work. He said, if you actually understand this program and you understand this program, they're incompatible. They'll actually be teaching two different incompatible methods in the same classroom. It won't work. It will not succeed. And as a result, we sat down at that charter school and kind of had a pretty high level conversation with the educational program or platform that was presented in that charter, and they actually agreed to withdraw their petition and submit a new concept for the next year. And so that's an example of what that criteria is about. Now, Polis is a pretty well-established school. I think they have sound leadership. Their success is certainly, there's some objective benchmarks out there about their success. So I imagine that they're going to come to you with some pretty well-developed ideas about their educational program. Who knows, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're going to present something that's just wackadoo. I don't know, for a better word, but I don't think that's what they're going to do. I think you're going to see something that's considered and generally accepted.
Further questions, trustees? Comments?
Thank you for your time, thank you for your patience.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Ellen. I'm off my game tonight. Were there any members of the community that wish to make comments on this item about charter schools? Okay. The next item on the agenda is our English learner board goal, but I think we should take a brief break. So let's come back in 10 minutes, it's 8:36, come back at 9:46.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much.
We didn't need elementary.
Yes, we did.
Are you
breaking
out? Did your father Frank come? Yeah, I did. Okay, maybe it's random.
Is it HUFF or
Oh.
When we left off, HUVH,
When did that happen? Okay, all right, thanks a lot. Thank you.
This is more overview. Here's your provision. Oh, I see. That way, if we just know that if Allison's out, he goes into Allison. Like this, I like to listen to all my staff and they all are doing there are a lot of any other pictures? Was it for shadowing I knew they did one. They're like coming back for Did you know that? No, I didn't know that. Oh, yeah, we did that. We're talking to yeah, that's good. Hopefully not. Hopefully you all for that as well, but for the tomorrow, I was thinking that. Hopefully be
This is perfect. Yes, yeah, sure, yeah. Whatever. I'm not jealous.
Exactly, get some people to understand.
We're happy hour tomorrow. This company will never go up.
I think I know.
You were expecting to hear from me. You should know each other.
I thought about
Okay, let's get back to business, please. The next item is the English Learner Award Goal Update. Good evening, Board of Education. Thank you, Madam President, guests and community members, and esteemed colleagues. I bring to you an update of a group of interest to all of us that the board is impressed upon us, aligned with the strategic plan to make sure that we're monitoring by cohort our English learners. So today we'll outline who our students are and next steps. So in addition to identifying this group, just as a reminder, aligned to our strategic plan, we already have items moving forward, such as the SIAM implementation and the K-3 early language acquisition piece, where we're identifying those strategies for replication district-wide that we learned so much about this past summer and look forward to honing moving forward. More importantly, our board has given us our goal to revise the entire English learner program so that we hit that target of 80% of our students who are English learners, that they're on par with their peers within a 6-year period. Tonight we'll discuss how we will measure that, how we came up with the cohorts, who's included in that, and again, next steps for you. So again, as you know, we're transitioning from the former SELF exam to the LPAC, just remembering that transition and honoring the new assessment and how much it tells us that we are moving forward with honoring the listening, speaking, reading, and writing that's assessed through this assessment. Last spring, we had our first summative. Just a week ago or so, we finished our first, well, actually second round of initial assessments using LPAC, and we look forward to this spring being our second time around with the LPAC. Again, usually first time that you administer an assessment, that's time for norming, baseline, tweaking. So we're really looking forward to what this spring of 2019 will bring. But we did receive scores, which is really interesting. We were able to use those scores to establish our cohorts that we'll talk about tonight. So let's just talk a little bit more about the LPAC and the language levels. So being on par with our peers means a level 4 in LPAC. So we do want to be clear of the target for us. And if you take a look at the different levels 1, 2, and 3, all of those levels would be considered not proficient, but moving along the continuum of language acquisition nicely. Okay, and again, our target is to be at that level 4, where we believe that the English skills are well developed. There's a use of academic language. It's just not conversational. When you take a look at the assessment bands that somewhat correlate. So just to give you an idea, students receive a score report from LPAC. They'll get a score of 1, 2, 3, 4. However, the English language development standards and framework breaks down languages into 3 parts. So we have to pare down those 3 areas of emerging, expanding, and bridging language. Bridging being level 4,
into those 4 categories or sub-scores of 1 through 4. If you look, some of level 3 and level 4 do share that bridging piece, but very little of 3. And as we consider raising the rigor in many areas of our educational offering here in Mountain View Wisman, we want to go with the higher end of level 4, as far as students who are on par, not a high 3. So who's involved in our cohort? As we discussed last time, it will be current English learners in grades K to 3. So these are students from last year. Remember, we needed to wait until the scores came in. They would be our first group where we have an actual baseline. And within that cohort, you'll notice that there'll be 4 groups, and additional groups will be continued to be created within those groups as we continue to disaggregate the data and update the cohorts throughout the year, whether it's disenrollment, reclassification, or any other reasons. So you'll see cohort 1 grade K, and it'll be cohort 1 with each grade level respectively. Again, we really rely heavily on LPAC, and we want that highest level of 4 as we're moving for higher expectations for our students in the hopes of preparing them to move on to high school a little better prepared, right, for the long term. And again, it is our job, or I guess goal, to monitor the students for the next 6 years. So, who's in cohort 1 and how are they doing? So we have 623 students already. 1 has been disenrolled. So again, that just points to the moving target of our English learner population, how fluid it is, but we'll continue to update that, and I'll talk about the intervals of how and when we'll update the cohorts throughout the year, so that next year when I present, we'll have a measurement and hopefully some comparisons of how they're doing. But if you do take a look already at level 4, we have almost 46% of our students. If you take a look at that red area, those are our level 1s, and if you remember that band, the continuum of language, that's that beginning piece, right? Just emerging, not yet expanding. And then level 2 and level 3 will be that expanding before you get to the bridging. So when we take a look at numbers of students, we've gotten away from our percentages, along with numbers, principals, and the entire Ed Services department. We are aware of our students' names, they have an identity, we know where their schools are, and that's the piece that we hope to follow, that actually this work goal has been very helpful with. It's personalizing for us that more detailed work that we want to do with our English learners. And again, if you can see, the majority of our students are actually in a good place. With 286, and level 3 right there on the cusp, almost another 25%. All still deserving of our support at all levels, especially in light of our reclassified fluent English proficient scores, right? So just because they're in that green doesn't mean they're okay and leave them to the side. We're just aware of the next level of work for them. That continues. I've also broken it down for you by grade level. So if you look at the grade levels across the top, that was the grade that our current cohort in 18-19, what grade level they were in last year. That was the establishment year for them. So, you know, grade K is now our current grade 1. But if you take a look, I thought it would be kind of nice to see, okay, of the grade levels, we've talked about how can we break this down and disaggregate and have meaningful conversations. Kindergartners are coming in fairly strong. You'll see that trend going all the way up to grade 2, which is now our present grade 3. And if you take a look at our grade 3, who are our 4th graders, you'll see that at 14.4%, right? So if you think, as you move along the continuum, right, more of our students are coming out who are becoming reclassified, and our students who are staying with us are the ones who will need even more support and more. We can talk more. Grade level 3, current grade level 4, later on if you have questions.
I already have a question. Is it not the, one of the goals of cohorts like this to not have the students that learn English well get removed from the cohort problem? If that's true, but like cohort 1 grade K that has, I forget, 200 students almost, except for students that leave the district. Whether they reclassify or not, they're going to stay in that 200, correct? So
yes.
They can count their level 4 as a success.
Okay, yes, yes.
Now, I guess that didn't happen with cohort 1, grade 3, or why would it be so small?
That's our existing students. That's where they were last year in the year of establishing the cohort of the students that we had the entire year. All of our English learners, we only had that total number in 3rd grade. That's where we captured them. Right, well, maybe I'm listening.
I just heard, because some had already been reclassified, but I thought we weren't supposed to be taking reclassifications out of, like,
Oh, I see what you mean.
I would count your cohort grade 3 students, all of them that were English learners in that cohort, because otherwise, this analysis is subject to the same flaw that the old one was, which was, as we teach English, the number of students left gets lower and lower, and they're all, you know, only the ones that haven't succeeded.
I think I may have misspoken on that, Dr. Rudolph.
So we went down this road, we said that the state test that we were going to use was the LPAC. And so these are the students that were eligible to take the LPAC. The other ones that had already been reclassified are now removed from the list because they wouldn't get the LPAC anymore. We couldn't use the subject.
So then when that.
So this is now the static list.
Got it. And so, and it won't, the phenomenon that led to that being smaller is a thing in the past. Every student goes forward can take
Correct. So
elements.
those 19 students who are this group of individuals who were in cohort 1, grade 3, will always remain, even if they get reclassified, will always remain a part of that cohort. However, that percent is a reflection of these students. It is not a percent of all students who were in third grade who may have started in K as EL students.
I would consider that cohort to be kind of like that data to be suspect. I wouldn't count that cohort.
But when we started this, we stated that because the cell was ending and that was the test that we were going to use as a measurement, that there was no way, we can't go back, we can't administer the cell anymore, so this is the only way for us to create this cohort. The only option would be is that you would essentially, because actually under that philosophy, we've had kids reclassified from younger grades too. You would just start with K, and that would become your first cohort.
I'm surprised that since 1 and 2 have the same problem with that they don't show that much of a difference with K.
When you say difference, Ms.
Dr. Rudolph was just pointing out that cohort 1, grade 1 and cohort 1, grade 2 also have not been able to take LPAC the whole time they've been in our district. But there's a steep drop between 2 and 3. And so
you've had kids who classified in grade 1, you've had kids who classified in grade 2. For K, those students wouldn't have had the opportunity to classify because that doesn't happen until the next year.
I was talking about how 1, 2, and 3, grades 1, 2, and 3. Grades 1 and 2 are similar, and grade 3 is not similar to grades 1 and 2. But all 3 of them have the problem that they had to get LPAC all 3 years.
So yeah, all these, so grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3, those cohorts are going to be smaller than what the actual number was when they started in year 1.
And remember, we captured grades that we would be able to do the work for 6 years. So that didn't include our 3rd graders last year.
Yeah.
But definitely something to know. Next question.
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so now what? Share this with everyone, and we're starting with you. And we've already started to disaggregate the data, find out more what's happening within the sub-cohorts, really take a look at our English learner progress monitoring process that Tara McJoy mentioned during the CASP update, which is also aligned and supports our work with RFEP students, and really looking at that monitoring process, making sure that we are implementing it with fidelity and supporting the sites and principals to be able to do that in the midst of this transition period between assessments. Also talking about the assessment of progress towards this goal at our next annual update. It will come almost a year behind, as you know, because our assessment will be in the spring of 2019. And hopefully, upon guidance from
the state. We do believe reclassification may be on the January 2019 agenda. And until then, we've been given directions to hold tight with what we have as far as the requirements and the criteria and let's see, that ranks as far as the classification. Any questions?
Yes, I have a couple questions. They're straightforward. So for grade K, 1, 2, 3, we still have the following in place at every single school site. After school programs where we help our kids to try better the language skills, like Lexia. And then we also have RTI at those levels as well at each school site to help our kids with this issue, or does it vary by school site?
So the after-school programming does vary by school site. Lexi is not a district-wide paid program. Some sites have school licenses. However, the district does pay for Lexia Plus for English learners who are struggling district-wide. So that is offered. The licenses are coordinated through Arlene Sion, our coordinator, and she speaks with the principals of any students who may not have that. If it is a site that doesn't have a site license for Lexia, and supports definitely vary from site to site, but we do check in on the supports.
And RTI is also an effect for the students in general at the school sites?
Oh yeah, RTI is at every site. It's a wonderful partner.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, trustees? Were there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Okay, thank you, Ms. Smith. Thank you. Let's see, the next item on the agenda is board updates. I trust that most of us have or will, in my case, email our report to Ms. Wilcott.
But I would like to say something.
I would like to say something while we are all live here, is a bill that a lot of us have followed in the legislature. It was a start time bill and waiting to see what the governor was going to do about that bill. And today he vetoed it. So at least for this year, school districts can keep their current start times, and then next year we'll have a new governor.
We will have a new governor.
May I ask trustee Wheeler a follow-up question? If the governor had signed that bill, we wouldn't have had to change our schedule this year. No, but it would have happened next year.
That makes sense.
Oh, 8th grade and middle school is covered by that too. So it would affect us, but, okay, so then this year's no late start and next year also. Because it can't get changed that high.
Unless we as a board and district.
Oh, we could put it around, yeah.
Okay. Do you want to say anything about Jose Antonio Vargas' new book coming out? No? I thought it was wonderful. Our new, the namesake of our new school that has a new book, I believe. You read it from my.
It's already read it.
Wonderful.
Wow.
Came
out today.
No, it came, we got a free.
You got a free.
It came out Tuesday, I believe it was officially released. It's called, Dear America, Notes on Undocumented Citizen. So I think it's good.
I'm not allowed.
The 18th.
Oh, okay.
They were.
I would encourage people to read it. Items for future agendas, I did want to mention that I'd like to put on our next agenda, there's a resolution that has been proposed to declare October LGBTQ plus, I think, month. And so I thought the agenda was more crowded this time, we didn't get it on, but we'll have it on October 4th.
Are there any other items for future agendas that we're tracking?
Yeah, I have a question, just like, are you asking for items for future agendas? Was that, okay. I'd like to get an update on where we stand with dual immersion program and how that's going along, with us revisiting possibly how to actually implement the dual immersion program in the future.
So it's on the calendar already.
Okay.
For the issue.
Oh, I didn't see it here, that's why I asked. Sorry about that.
Are there any other items that we, for future agendas that we've got on the list and we're working on scheduling?
Who's
keeps the list?
I mean,
Anyone else not it? President Blakely, do you keep the list?
I can't really know that everybody in this will get.
We keep those.
What is on the list?
well, there's one here, and then there's one on,
No,
site for that.
I don't mean the schedule of future board meeting dates.
Well, because that
But
also has.
continuing topics, it's like plans are gonna have it to them.
Yeah.
Although did that get moved, we're not gonna have, there's a conference in the school site plan, one is gonna be moved to a different day, correct? The 18th and the Thursday, maybe?
It is the 18th and the 15th.
18th, okay. Because the conference conflicts with the, principals, a lot of principals are attending.
Are there any other items that we are waiting for? Because I remember one.
Share.
Kathy, do you give a list of things that we can? This is the one I've been asking for since April, May, June, August, and September. So when is that going to be on the agenda?
I'm not sure.
Going to be on the next meeting agenda?
Possibly.
About, yes, because it was going to be on May, and it's on past June. Because
That would include, we need to consult with other people.
in fact, we're all, the people you wanted to consult with, you said you consulted them 2 weeks ago. Consult with the principal.
It's requiring teachers to come, and so I think offline we should talk about why it wasn't scheduled right now. There's a clear conflict that we need to
That's interesting.
Yes.
Well, at least we have an update on that, and then I can pursue that, we'll talk to it all outside this one.
Is there anything further, trustees? And if not, at 9:06, this meeting is adjourned.